and welcome to the first episode of the Albany Made podcast, the new podcast from the Albany Public Library. My name is Scott Jarzombeck, and I am the library's director. As I hope everyone out there already knows, APL hosts thousands of free programs and loans out over 90,000 books, DVDs, and other items every month. Our librarians answer more than 12,000 reference questions every month on topics ranging from census data to local resources to tough crossword puzzle clues. And we provide free public computers, Wi-Fi access, and a safe, welcoming space for residents and visitors to the Albany community every single day. So we decided to create this podcast as yet another way of reaching out to and engaging with our community. This podcast is about the city of Albany and the library's place in it. We'll discuss what's going on at our 7 locations, what we're doing in the greater Albany community, and what cool and interesting things our sibling libraries are doing across New York. We also want to hear from you, our patrons. Maybe you're curious about the programs and services we offer. Maybe you're wondering what goes on in the Albany Made Creative Lab. So send us those questions, along with your comments and podcast ideas, and we'll answer them as thoroughly as only librarians can.
I'm in the Albany Made Creative Lab talking with Matt Durfee, who's been one of our most active local musicians here at the library. Matt has played garage bands with his band The Rattling Badleys, and he's played at the Delaware Ave Farmers Market, which takes place in the Delaware Branch parking lot, and he was our resident Blue Mondays musician a few years ago, playing a Monday evening free concert every week before our guitar workshops. Most importantly, Matt inspired the Reading Music series, which is now approaching its 3rd year of existence. Did I forget anything?
That's pretty close to everything, I believe. I did play the garage bands with Mike Palopoulos as Platypus years and years ago. And I took part in the Murder Ballad series that was here in the local history room not too long ago.
That's right. And actually, you wrote a song that kind of inspired us to think about the Murder Ballads program to begin with. You wrote a song that's based on a local murder.
That's true. The Whole Nine was actually about a love triangle up in the Waterford, Cohoes area. And it was many, many years ago, almost 50 years ago. And it ended with the murder of one of the men and went unsolved for many years. It was classified as a disappearance. And then, the truth finally came out in the papers. So, I had a pre-made murder ballad for that night. I was pretty lucky.
Ooh, yeah, it was a warm night for being April. And I was walking to the north side. I saw you and David. And he was bobbing with a sharp knife. You were trying to take it. And you were armed with a cold knife and lover's anger. And you were giving.
For those of you that didn't attend the Murder Ballad program last year, we challenged local musicians to write original murder ballads based on local murders, historical murders, and we supported their research with materials from the local history room. So it was a little macabre, but it was fun.
It was pretty spooky.
So let's talk about reading music. You were involved in the inaugural event featuring M.R. Palopoulos again, performing songs inspired by William Kennedy's Albany cycle. What do you remember about that night?
My initial memory is just a feeling of great success. There's a lot of times when you try to start up a new program like that, I think, and there's kind of stumbling blocks along the way. In terms of getting that series off the ground, we couldn't have kicked it off much better, I think. We had somebody that was very involved with the literature that he was working on. We had some great musicians take part in it, some really neat original songs, and we had a visit from the author who was there to answer questions. It was phenomenal, like way beyond expectations, I think, for putting it together. And aside from that, I just remember being glad to be able to take part of something that I know was so important to Mike. He loves William Kennedy and all of his literature. And he's met him several times over the years, so it was great to be able to see him take part in something that meant so much to him.
And that program is another challenge to local musicians to write a number of original songs based on the works of one writer or one piece of literature. And you came up with that idea. I remember we were talking, I think it was during one of those Blue Monday performances. Yeah. And we had an ongoing reading music program where we discussed memoirs by musicians, and attendance was kind of dwindling, so we were trying to figure out a way to make it a more exciting program, and you came up with that idea, and it's been great.
Yeah, it's. I think it's an interesting way to get some new ideas, to write outside of the box, and just be inspired by literature.
So you and Michael Eck accepted the Reading Music Challenge and performed at our second event. So tell us about the book you chose and how the songwriting process worked.
We worked on John Steinbeck's East of Eden, which is one of my favorite books. It has some religious overtones. It has some family overtones. It's just like a big, sprawling novel. And even though it's set in the early part of the century, it's sort of timeless, the qualities in it. So there are some really well-developed characters in the novel as well. So that made it easy for me to create songs based on people and their actions. Whereas Mike Eck took some of the broader themes and worked a little closer to the actual words of the book. He used some of those in his songs, which was really neat. It was tough. It's a big book. Like I said, it's many, many hundreds of pages, and trying to condense some of those ideas down to 3 and 4 minute songs was a challenge, but it was a lot of fun.
Did you have any other books or writers that you considered?
I have several. I love to read. I've been an avid reader for many years. David Foster Wallace has an incredible book, Infinite Jest, and when we initially started talking about the reading music program, that was the novel I would have wanted to do. But it's a challenging book. I feel like maybe even the first third of it is kind of designed to put people off of it to see if they're going to finish it or not. There's some really difficult parts of it. But there's not really a wasted word in the novel. And I think some of the ideas in it are so out there, it would make for some really great songwriting.
Well, let me know when you want to do that.
Yeah,
And we'll book the history room for a couple of days straight through.
Yeah, right. We need a symphony orchestra to fully get across the musical ideas from that one. But the Screwtape Letters is also another book I've been thinking about doing. If you're not familiar with it, it's a collection of letters from a demon to his young nephew, advising him how to take advantage of the human being folly and how to get inside people and turn them. So it's a really beautiful book. It has a little bit of a religious overtone, and I'm not overly religious, so it'd be kind of challenging, but it's dark and it's funny. I think it would be fun.
So I remember when you were putting the finishing touches on your own album, Little World, you sent me a text here at the library to see if we had Adobe Photoshop, because you needed that to finish your cover art. And we didn't have Photoshop at the time, but now we do in the Creative Lab, along with some other resources I think local musicians might find useful. What else can we do for you and other local musicians here at the library?
Well, it's incredible what the library has been able to do, I think, for the musical community in the last, 5-6 years in general. There's a ton of musical-based programs. You guys are an integral part of the musical community, and you offer some really neat, outside-of-the-box places for people to play. Or not even places, but just concepts for people to play around with. In terms of helping make more music, I would love to see a musical instrument lending library. I think it would be a great idea. If somebody needs a fiddle on their record and they don't have a fiddler, or they just want to mess around with some sounds, they could come down, grab a rusty old trombone here from the library and take it home and make some noise with it. I think it's a concept I've thought about myself for a few years, just kind of having a junk room full of stuff that people could pull out of and use what they need to.
Thanks. Well, we love you, and we really appreciate all of the ways that you've contributed to programming over the years. So if there's anything that you see fitting in at the library, please be in touch. And that's kind of a message to all of the musicians in Albany and the surrounding areas. Come and check us out and play here.
For sure. I've said it for a few years now that the library is one of the best venues in the city. So I'm glad to be a part of it. Thank you guys.
Access APL from your mobile device with our free app. No need to carry your library card. You can simply show us the app at the checkout and take your books home. The app can also be used to search the catalog, renew materials, access ebooks, manage your library account, find library locations and hours, and view the calendar of events. Albany Public Library Mobile is available for free. Just download it at the Apple or Android store.
Also known as Devo, who is one of our biggest and most devoted fans of the silent film Spectacular, a series that takes place every fall and now spring too, where we challenge local musicians to create and perform original scores to classic silent films. Ryan has also scored a few films himself, including The Penalty, and most recently, Buster Keaton's The General. Do you remember what was the first film you saw here at the Spectacular?
I believe it was October of 2013, and it was The Lodger with music by Ryan Slowey.
It's Alfred Hitchcock. That was a great film. Your films have had, and I'm saying this in no way to offend anyone else's approach to the program, maybe more structure. And how did you approach writing the scores?
I definitely have a classical approach to it. I was raised as a classical pianist, and it wasn't until college that I started playing rock and other genres. So I definitely approach everything from that classical perspective. What works for me is I like to watch the movie, make notes of everything that happens when characters are introduced and the timeline for the movie, and that gives me a good idea of what needs to happen when.
So you've put together ensembles with other musicians. How did you choose the people that you worked with?
The first one, The Penalty, I was playing at the time with a band of some friends, formerly of the band Cooper Union. We called ourselves Skunk Hostage and the Bomb Inspectors. And I asked them if they would be interested, and they were, so I included them. And I also wanted to get some violin in there. I wrote music for 2 violins, but unfortunately one of the guys dropped out, and Justin, the guitar player, stepped up and learned a lot of the violin lines on the guitar, and it's amazing.
You had an idea of the instrumentation that you wanted before you wrote the scores to the films?
Yes. I mean, I wanted to do it for a rock band because I knew I would have those guys available, and then I just wanted that extra drama with the violins. For the second one I wanted to make it a lot simpler so I wouldn't have people dropping out on me, and I did it with just piano and guitar. My good friend Justin, again, played with me. We've been friends since the 1st grade, so I knew I could count on him.
That was pretty funny. Was that his idea to include Crazy Train, or was that you?
That was all him.
So were you a fan of silent films prior to seeing them with a live score?
A little bit, not as much as I am now. I used to work at this music school. I taught there for 9 years, and we would do work with this guy every now and then. His name is Donald Socin, and he's this world-renowned silent movie pianist. And so we did some workshops with him, which were really cool, but a lot more like old-fashioned and traditional, just piano, and he has his wife sing along with him sometimes.
Wow, I had no idea. That's really cool.
Yeah, he tours around the world, and like I went to his website, and Leonard Maltin has a quote on there saying that he's like the best.
So what advice would you give to someone considering a silent film project?
Definitely pick bandmates that you can count on. Prepare early. For the first one I did, I was working on it a year in advance. And I just wanted to make sure that everything that I had in my head was clear to the other performers. You can't leave anything up to guesswork. You have to let them know exactly what's in your head.
So in addition to writing music for silent films, you wrote our podcast theme, which we all love. What was your inspiration, and does the theme song have a name? For a name,
yes, I called it Singing to Myself, but only because I'd been doing that a lot lately. But really, I guess I'm singing to the dog. I spend a lot of time with the dog. When you asked me to write that, I recently set up my room as a recording studio, and I had all my instruments in there and the synthesizer and stuff, and I was messing around with all these electronic sounds, and I did not like it at all. And so I totally switched gears and wanted to go for something, this is the library, you guys have books, so I made some percussion sounds using things around my desk, like a book slamming and a piece of paper ripping, and then added some echo and some maracas, and voila, I got a cool beat.
So you're a podcast aficionado, and I'm sure you have some ideas about what makes a good podcast. So what topics would you like us to cover here on the Library Show podcast?
I like a variety of topics. It's all on how you present it, right? Find a way to tell a story with it,
Thanks again, Ryan, for coming, and I hope we'll see you back at the Silent Film Spectacular.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So, Sarah, why do we bother bringing live music into the library?
Well, I think living in Albany, I know there are musicians everywhere, and it seems as time goes by, there are fewer places to play. So why not the library? We've had musicians here. They love playing here. We want to support the people in the community, and we have a lot of talented people right here.
So how do you find them? How do you, identify a band that you want to play at the library that you think would be a good fit?
I go out to a lot of shows and make mental notes, try to see who draws a crowd. When I first started booking shows for garage bands, I started with people that I knew, friends of mine who had bands, because they were known quantities to me. And then as time goes on, people have been approaching me, asking to play and asking to score silent films. So I've been really happily surprised at how many people are interested in coming to play at the library.
When you decided to become a librarian, did you think you'd be incorporating music into your career?
Not immediately. I think I started out as a music major in college, and that didn't work out for me. But I knew that when I became a librarian, there were parts of my life I wouldn't have to give up just to be a librarian, where if I chose a more specific profession, it couldn't be part of my day. Whereas as a librarian, you can bring in your strengths and talents into what you do and create an environment for other people like you that want to perform or provide art for a display or whatever it is.
So you're a musician. Can you give us some of your background, maybe some of the bands that you've performed in and the styles of music that you enjoy playing?
Sure. I played piano and keyboards growing up, classical piano, and then I started playing bass about 10 years ago. And I've played in mostly rock bands. Right now I'm in a surf band called Kimono Dragons. That's probably the busiest band that I'm in right now. I'm also in a soul band. So I really like all types of music, and the more I branch out, the more appreciation I have for more genres.
Is there a particular program that you've done with the library or service that you've provided at the library that you think really stands out, something that you're proud of?
When I worked with Jim Davies in the local history room last year for the Murder Ballads program, that to me was maybe the most fantastic night of music that we've ever had, just because it was so great to see musicians getting so into writing about local events. And it was around Halloween, which is my favorite time of year, so it was a little creepy because of that, and it was great.
Face is turning purple like the violet sheets beneath.
The murders that they researched were really interesting, and everybody had their own take on it, and I would love to do that again.
How does the community react and the musicians react to playing in a venue like a library? It's not your traditional venue. It's not a club. It's definitely an odd space for some people.
Yeah, everybody jokes that they're going to be loud in the library, and when they share our Facebook event, they always put in some puns and stuff. I think they play along, but ultimately it's an opportunity for them to play for people of all ages, which they wouldn't have if they were playing at a club. We also get people who are in recovery programs that may not want to go out to a bar. So I think it's a place to play, even for bands that are starting out, where they can draw an audience that they can't draw when they play at a club.
What's been the biggest obstacle, or what's your biggest nightmare story you've had so far doing events like this?
Oh my gosh. Well, there have been a couple of times when people have double booked and we've had to find a replacement band last minute, and it's actually worked out really well every time that's happened. But it doesn't happen until the day before or the day of, so there's a lot of last minute scrambling. I can't really think of anything worse than that.
So how does your organization, Albany Public Library, support the local music scene, and what do you think the library could do better in the future?
I think we support them by having a different place to play. When we do the silent films, we pay for the rights to show the film, which I don't know if everybody knows is something that you have to do when you show film to the public. And we have spaces that they don't have around town, like our large auditorium, which is kind of a really movable space. We can set it up to do performance. In a different way, we've had bands do parades in the garage, just really odd things. And I've encouraged bands to reach out to us if they have an idea for something that just would not fit in a club or a different performance space in Albany. We also have in our Albany Made Creative Lab resources for bands to make flyers, buttons. We have Photoshop, so when you're working on album art, this is a good place to stop by. And you'll hear Matt Durfee in his interview talk about musical instrument lending program, and that's something I'd really like to think about in the next year.
You're a big part of this podcast, and this is our first episode. What are some of the things you'd like us to do in the future, talk about in the future, maybe cover?
I ran with Jim Davies, again, the local history librarian, for the History Run program that we had over the summer, and learned a lot about local history. And I've kind of gotten into that since then. I've been listening to the Listen with the Lights On local podcast. And I think Albany has so many interesting stories, and we provide so much support for people doing research on local history that I'd like to hear a whole episode devoted to our history collection.
Thank you for coming and talking with us, Sarah, and thank you for working on the podcast with us.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you for tuning into Albany Made. Look or listen for our next installment of this show on SoundCloud or on the APL website at albanypubliclibrary.org/podcast. We'd like to thank everyone who made this podcast possible. Our guests, Matt Durfee and Ryan Devine, Head of Creative Services and host, Sarah Clark, Engineer, Ryan Slowey, and producer, Dana Wilbanks. From everyone here at the Albany Public Library, thank you for listening to Albany Made. I'm Scott Jarzon.